Hello, we are back with yet another episode of Cutting Edge. I'm Ben, you know me by now, and I've brought yet another co-host. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rodney Taveira. I'm a senior lecturer in American Studies at the University of Sydney, and I'm the academic director of the US Studies Centre.
Brilliant. And again, you can find more information about the guests. All of it is in the show notes, so if you're missing out on details here, don't worry, you'll find it all linked there. And we've got our brilliant guest. Can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, of course. I'm Ian Maxwell. I'm an associate professor at the discipline of Theatre and Performance Studies at the University of Sydney.
Oh, almost demoting yourself. Don't want that. Don't let the Vice-Chancellor hear you like your salary.
It's that humility.
And there we go. We've got the first question. Come up, Rodney, if you please.
So Ian, Sergeant Snow White, it's a play you've been working on recently. So can you tell us a bit about the play itself, what's it about and what makes it unique, and maybe what were some of the challenges and rewards of bringing it to life?
It's quite a long story, but Sergeant Snow White was a revue, perhaps rather than a play, created in 1943 by men who had been transported to Australia as initially enemy aliens. So these were German and Austrian men, predominantly Jewish, who had been interned in Britain at the outbreak of the Second World War, transported to Australia, subsequently released, recategorised as refugee aliens, and they enlisted in the Australian Labor Corps. It's quite a long story. About 600 of these men ended up living in Melbourne, working on the docks in the years of the war, and they made performances. They made a particular performance, Sergeant Snow White, which was a revue, largely troped through Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And the script, which my colleague Joseph Toltz found in the archive of the Jewish Museum in Melbourne, is 3 acts. The first act sets up the fairy tale with a queen, a big bad wolf who is conjured out of the forest, who's a Hitler character, and the big bad wolf is set upon the court of the queen where there is a big banquet, and arrests all the dwarves and the fairies and the various attendees to the court and marches them off to a concentration camp.
Well, and at this point, we should say this is a humorous
well, it is.
It sounds hilarious.
Yes. It's very, very camp, is the first thing to say. So there's lots of cross-dressing, there's lots of singing and dancing, lots of popular music from the time, four-part harmony Mills Brothers songs, line dancing. It is kind of a festive party, and it's very funny. So and even the conjuring of the big bad wolf is comical. Mm-hmm. So there's a character who's only referred to as Long Nose. So I was working with
which in and of itself.
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of tropes.
And almost it almost sort of recapitulates stories of the golem, being.
Right. It was just hashtag let's get us cancelled.
Well, yeah, that's right. And it's funny and it's absurd and it's ridiculous. And the courtly life that's presented is playful and silly. So that when the stormtroopers march in, it's like a what the moment. The second act then opens and
if I may, because this might actually get us to the next question, which is all about. So you're obviously very passionate about this, and this play, and you're in theatre studies and performance. So why? So why are you interested in this? Not just again because it's your profession, but also this is kind of wild. It is. Sink your teeth into something like this. So why?
It is wild. Look, I'm not a very good theatre person. I don't.
Okay, we're going to edit this. You're an amazing theatre.
No. But I must admit, I don't enjoy going to see well-made dramas. Right. To sit in the theatre and just watch a play unfolding with people sitting around a dinner party talking. The kind of standard trope. Right. And I'm being very unfair about theatre, but I find myself thinking, why isn't this just a movie? Or why am I not just watching television?
So for me, an email.
That's right. But so what really draws me to performance is performance which actually, grabs the audience and has fun with them, doesn't attempt to present nicely crafted, resolved stories. Maybe I'm a bit more of an old showman. I like a bit of singing, dancing. Not a big fan of musical theatre, but I like stuff which is promiscuous in its form. So I love stuff that actually slips between genres. And I like stuff that is open-ended, that actually doesn't try to lay a message on an audience. And to me, so I'm not a Brechtian. I don't believe in a kind of didactic theatre.
Quote unquote Brechtian, you wouldn't be in here. You would be trying to alienate us outside.
Well, but I think in this work, and one of the points I want to make is that the men who came here on this ship called the Taveira, these expatriates, these aliens, were largely culture makers. So they were the kind of people who had fled Hitler in the 30s, relocated to Britain, Jewish intellectual culture makers. So there were many, many musicians amongst them, Bauhaus artists, film directors, choreographers, scenic artists, an amazing group of people. And to come across a script in which all those expertises were being played with in a manner which was innovative, sophisticated, fleshy, like it's a really kind of erotic show. There's a lot of sexual energy in it, a lot of camp humour.
Well, and to the audience, we have seen the slides. So again, if you want to email Ian for some visual evidence. And actually, I think this gets us nicely into the third question, which, back to Rodney.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that, you reject this kind of didactic nicely made three-act play aspect of theatre, and given this kind of like polyphony that you were describing in Sergeant Snow White, what do you hope audiences kind of learn? Maybe you don't hope they learn anything. What do you hope they get from the stories?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. I think about this a lot because I think working on this project, and my colleague Joseph Toltz is a collaborator, and this is the second piece of work along these lines that we've done. We want to tread very carefully in relationship to Holocaust studies, for example, which in questions of attempting to reproduce or to claim an empathy are hot-button issues in that field. So my feeling is, it's not my experience. I don't know it. But I'm a good theatre maker. I'm a good performance maker. So we can produce, to sound a little bit technical, particularly with a script like this, we can produce radical states of affect that are shared by an audience. A lot of the work that I do is working with what we call a post-dramatic dramaturgy. So it's not about characters and plot and resolution.
It's post-dramatic, not post-traumatic.
Yes, right, post-dramatic. So we kind of resist ideas of closure and catharsis and resolution to instead create places in which people can experience things together, which are new things, which are not recreations of past things. So in a sense, what I most want audiences to get out of this is quite a utopian notion. Or that's not fair to say that. What strikes me most is that the one way I come at this is through thinking about the standby Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Mm-hmm. Now, we have this notion that you've got to get shelter, clothing, food in place before you can do other stuff.
Right.
And my take is, no, humans make culture very quickly, and that in very intense situations, the making of culture, the not just sharing of stories, but the sharing of states of affect and being together is an utter priority, if not the luxury that you're afforded when other things have happened. So Joseph and I worked on another piece a few years ago about a cabaret created in Terezin, in the ghetto in Czechoslovakia. And it's a very similar thing. Like, Terezin wasn't a death camp, but the possibility of death was very close. Right. And people, the good people of Prague who were moved into Terezin, almost from the moment they got there, they set up orchestras, reading groups. The Taveira boys, these men, were transported to Australia, initially placed into a camp in Hay, in central New South Wales. Again, their immediate priority was to set up a de facto university.
And I mean, just, again, because we have only got so much time here, but the question then would be, and I know the passion is kind of, I think, radiating through the mic at this point, but so what do you think, or what do you hope to get out of this as a pedagogical mind, or like as an instructor, as a drummer, person, or like, and also in terms of entertainment value. So where's for you the line between this is entertainment, this is art, this is performance, this is for the people, for the audience? Okay,
it's a great question, and my response is that there is no line between those things. These things tumble in together. In resisting ideas about empathy, I'm not suggesting that we can't reach out to each other. And I think one of the appeals of doing work like this is, again, I'm sorry to sound like a real academic here, is that we have an encounter with difference which isn't resolved in an identification with difference. And I think that's actually what these kind of practices do. They give us a shared space to encounter something which isn't just myself again. And I'd be quite happy for people to come out of work like this going, wow, I actually don't know what that was about. But I feel like
I've got that feeling every time I'm reading an article.
No, that's true. But we have such a drive at the moment in the world. I'm always want to diagnose it as a state of the world, that we have to have the hot take on things, where we give something a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and we seek to
clear cut.
That's right, and we seek to eradicate ambiguity and discomfort. And I think we all end up in a hall of mirrors, seeing the rest of the world as versions of ourselves and rejecting things that don't do that. So my desire as a person making this work is to sort of say, hang on, the possibility of empathising or identifying doesn't exhaust what we can do, that we can actually encounter difference and we don't have to assimilate it or reduce it, but we have to, and here's me being a bit didactic, I think we have to learn to live with those differences and complexities rather than attempt to resolve them.
Right. And I mean, it couldn't be smoother of a transition to get us into Act 5, which is back to Rodney.
Yeah, and not to preempt your answer, but this talk of ambiguity, might clue us into perhaps the function of humour and artistic expression in coping with adversity, right? These people who put on the play, who created it, obviously came out of difficult times. So what do you think the lesson is that people working on humour in theatre can learn from it?
Look, I've been very interested I think a lot about humour being fundamentally about ambiguity rather than being stable. I think humour is inherently unstable. I think a lot of humour is about strategic ambiguity, throwing something out and then, holding out there to see what might happen with the option of retracting it. I was only kidding. That sort of thing. So it's a bit like in a capoeira, the martial arts, where the idea is that you also have to demonstrate that you could have hit someone, but you don't. Yeah? And it's this kind of thing where I've just demonstrated to you that I could have kicked your head in, but I didn't.
And we don't macho alpha territory.
No, but the game
needs more, but this is perfect. I'm just kidding. But, I think it's an interesting thing because so many ways, this kind of brutalist, you get Hitler on the stage and it's the same thing as, we were talking before about this other philosopher I was working on, what good is a tiger if it's, not real if you put it behind bars in a zoo. The thrill and the excitement for audiences is only because it is real danger. And if you make too much fun of Hitler as some pitiful character, why would people watch?
That's right. And I think, you picked me up very correctly on my overly agonistic trope.
Not at all.
But one of the things that we talk about, obviously, when we're talking about making theatre is playing. Right. And so play theory is really important to me. And of course, you can play a game to win it, or you can play a game to see what the possibilities of the game are. And I think we get locked very quickly into the idea that, you play a game to win, at which point, of course, the game is over. So there's lots of different ways to think about what this pushing and pulling. And so I think humour, particularly when you're dealing with subaltern humour, humour used against the master, is this idea of doing something that, could be a push, And if you push too far, you can snap back. It's what in African American studies is called signifying. This idea of it's what children do to us. Push the button and then withdraw and say, I was only kidding. And a lot of humour from people in those kind of conditions of challenging, uncertain times, a lot of humour is about that. Against that, we might sort of say, well, you can't shake the devil's hand and say you're only kidding. So there's risk associated with it.
Okay. Before we get too deep into the satanic. No, that's perfect. We've got 20 seconds left, and anything else you'd like to share with us about?
I should stress the Sergeant Snow White.
Now's your chance to close us out.
Yeah, Sergeant Snow White is ridiculously funny, and it's funny through its camp humour, its cross-dressing, through its ridiculing of authority, but also through the radical juxtapositions all the way through the work. So it swings from epic, out over-the-topness to dead seriousness in a heartbeat. And that excites me as a kind of form, as a dramaturgy, the jump cut between things. And I just make the note that the guy who originally directed it, Doc Sternberg, was a film director. So a lot of it's about film theory and radical.
There you go. Boy, one more thing to like it. That's it. We have reached the end of the time allotted. Again, thanks so much, Ian.
Yes, thank you, Ian.
Thanks so much for being here. Again, anything else you'd like to find out about the guests or the co-host, have a look at the show notes. Thanks so much. That's it.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.